Boom, do doom, 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 do doom, doom, boom, 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 boom. So, as most of the Stormlight stands begin to finish Rhythm of War, I thought I'd seize the moment to revisit Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere. After all, if there's one thing humanity values more than innovation, originality, and even novelty, it's illicitly torrented investiture. No. It's watch time? Advertiser-friendly content? It'll come to me. In any case, as all the world hoppers of the copper mine know, Sandon Branderson is the reigning high prince of dope-ass world building. From Steelheart to the Cosmere, all his shit is thought through immaculately. And I feel like to a lot of us amateur world builders, it kind of sets a standard. I see so much shitty, stupid, eye-rolly world building on a day-to-day basis. Toss together fantasy worlds that are some combination of super simple, technologically inconsistent, and blatantly unaware of their own biases. We've got stuff like Shield Hero, Divergent, the wizarding world of why the fuck not use the Time Turner to conjure like 9 Hermiones who can use future knowledge to totally fuck up the Death Eater's Dave Strider style. Divergent, the forgot to fix our racist bullshit realms, or Divergent. So when I set out to build the various worlds where I want to tell stories, I often turn to Rothfuss, Wildbow, or Sanderson to set the quality of what I should be aiming for. I mean, RWBY, the setting of the Stormlight Archive, is one of the single most impressive feats of world building I've seen to date. We've got linguistics, a million different systems of thought, gender deconstruction, and I do love some good gender deconstruction, a spirit world on all the drugs that Brando Sando would never actually take, and the recognition that crabs have always deserved. Praise be to our evolutionary superiors. It is rich and diverse, and the amount of thought put into every facet of each society is so complex that you will never write a fucking thing if you try to build your world to that degree of asshattery. It's the stellar example of not being lazy bullshit, which is, of course, unattainable madness. Lucky for us, Brandy, you're a fine girl, doesn't always get that, thoroughly weird. Maybe because if his world building, word count, podcast, YouTube, and personal blog output was any crazier, we'd quickly figure out that he's a bend alloy misting, at which point someone would kidnap him and hammer a spike through his heart into their armpit to absorb his powers. It's just basic self-preservation. Speaking of preservation, if we scamper on down to Scadrial, does it hold up to that glorious standard? Well, when compared to Rorschach... Well, compared to Rorschach... Why do I keep wanting to say Rorschach? Is it Rorschach? Watchmen! I still have ADHD, even though I've taken my meds. Whew! Well, compared to Rorschach, there just isn't much to it. In fact, it bears more similarities to the, lazy bullshit we were talking about earlier. But Mistborn doesn't actually suffer all that much in terms of satisfactory world building. We've got everything we need here, from authentic social structures to well-integrated magic, to Sanderson's funky little substitutes for fuck. By the Lord Ruler. Storm off! Well, rest in ruin. Go fuck yourself. There's still strange creatures with hidden histories, twists and turns in the prophecies and backstories of this reality, but it sure as hell isn't, hey, we're gonna throw some wacky new shit at you every 20 pages, and it's so well thought out that you won't even understand it until your 5th reread of the entire Cosmere. And I think that is where the simpler world has its benefits. See, for those of us who like nuance and complexity in our storytelling, there's a bit of a catch-22 when it comes to fantasy landscapes. When you build a fantasy world, you actually build it twice. Once, in your head, on your pages, in your ever-expanding and increasingly disorganized Scrivener document, what have you. And then again in the head of your readers as you tell the story. And then if you're Marvel Comics, you build it again, except this time there's a black punk rock Spider-Man who fights against a CEO-turned-totalitarian president and his venom-powered military police unit because you have some fucking taste, apparently. When are we getting a Spider-Punk movie, and can it be 2016? I'm not exactly saying it's one-to-one in terms of the harder it was for you to come up with, the harder it is for the audience to understand. That'll all depend on your craft and how you world build in story. But the more complex something is, and the more it ain't familiar, the more likely it is to become a permanent paperweight for your floor space, which is exactly what makes Mistborn the perfect gateway drug to the Cosmere, and exactly what so many slapped-together fantasy worlds are going for. So, my fledgling world builders, assuming you don't want to construct an entire multiplanar web of social nuance, Scadrial might be able to teach us a thing or two about how to make simplicity a facet of your world, rather than a flaw. Holy shit, we are like 5 minutes in, how am I only now getting to the fucking point? Now, in case you guys have forgotten some of the delightful facets that make up this setting, maybe we should do some sorta quick and straightforward recap of all it has to offer. Hey there, all you world hoppers! Are you looking for a sunny vacation destination for the holidays? Do you just loathe mosquitoes along with, like, most other flora and fauna? And have you been justly and irrevocably banned from every other world in this mess of a literary universe? Well, welcome your wanted ass to Scadrial, where the only bloodsuckers you'll find are the bourgeoisie. Ha ha ha. And also cultists with ritual spikes. Here, under the blood-red scalding furnace we call a sky, you can enjoy all manner of indoor and outdoor activities. Visit the beautiful city of Luthadel, or any of the dozen other places that also like to call themselves cities. Go for a swim in the rivers that are least likely to have arsenic in them. You could take a hike up the ash mounds, which blanket our sky with pollution that keeps us from burning to death like we probably deserve, or you could just watch their magnificent beauty from afar. After all, who hasn't wanted to see the least awesome part of a volcanic eruption happen on the daily? Now I know what you're thinking. What's the nightlife like? Well, boy, do I have news for you. Do you like stars, the night sky, or being able to see more than 2 feet in front of your goddamn face? Wonderful! Neither do we! You'll be pleased to hear that our night is characterized by the mists, a brilliant feature of the atmosphere perfectly suited for midnight drives, encounters with shambling, mindless bone slime monstrosities, and scaring the preservation out of peasants. Scadrial Travel Agency cannot be held responsible for any carcinogens that may be present in the environment, emotional manipulation that may or may not occur, dissatisfaction with the general shithole that this entire place is, or injuries you may sustain from the upper class. They are allowed to just beat you in public. It is what it is. Contact your doctor to see whether inhaling carcinogens on the daily is right for you. Seriously, why don't you just go to Nalthus? At least those guys are just capitalist religious zealots because their gods are actually likable. Lights on. I know you said it was just a one-time thing, but I can't help it. I fall too easily for aloof morons. Call me. So then how do you world build in a way that's authentic and well articulated without spending the next 25 years of your life doing cultural research, mapping out philosophies, and forcing you and your readers to experience your 238-slide PowerPoint presentation about the socioeconomic repercussions of complex political dick measuring contests? Well, to start, it does in fact help if your world is not batshit crazy. Sorry, High Storms, you're super cool, but you also necessitate building like 50 different kinds of physics-breaking crabs into an evolutionary tree that looks like some kind of flagpole that folds itself into the ground on a weekly basis. Which is one of the many things that we are taking off of our to-do lists today. Scadrial used to look a heck of a lot like Earth, so we don't have to deal with the repercussions of evolution developing differently due to the natural environment like some Axoned owners do. On Scadrial, you could just find a dog and steal its bones just like you can on Earth, no problem. The fact that the Ash Mounds are a relatively new construction when it comes to an evolutionary timeline means that you only have to deal with the tweaks that the Lord Ruler made to physiology and terrain, almost as if he stands in as the writer and world builder, providing the meta-narrative so that these deviations would make more sense when they otherwise wouldn't. We still get all of those unique biologies, dark brown depression plants that have to absorb every iota of color and happiness in order to provide sustenance to the menial vestige of civilization that remains. But these aren't evolutionary changes. They're engineered and thus both easier to understand and easier to make up with only a cursory understanding of ecology, the life cycle, energy theory. To be a world builder is to learn everything. Well, fine, that works, but then how do you account for all the cultural stuff? People are complex, and they're going to run around and create more complexity if we're not careful. So how can you world build in a way that keeps things simple for the audience, but remains an interesting facet of your world? Facet, huh. Have you considered fascism? Welcome to the evil empire. Here in the wasteland of omnipresent pain, the empire reigns supreme, exploiting the world's natural resources as its massive armies and insidious intelligence agencies threaten sure destruction should any nation or group decide to stand against it. Their armies aren't just ruthless against external threats, of course. Back in their cities, militarized police forces armed to the teeth are granted the implicit license to kill you if they even think you're committing a crime, if only as an example. And the worst part? The Empire ruthlessly brainwashes its youth, teaching a warped version of history that frames it in the best possible light. This education is only set to become more rigorous in its erasure of history during the coming months. Alright, my reports are telling me that's not a fictional evil empire. They accidentally gave me a list of a bunch of stuff that America does and is still doing. My mistake.
My life I give to my country. With my hands I fight for Fire Lord and our forefathers. With my mind I seek ways to better my country. And with my feet
Firebenders! Fire Lord!
Well, we'd better just keep the video moving. After all, fantasy's not about that political Twitter stuff. It just exists in an escapist vacuum where nothing ever gets that deep. Now, Scadrial has a lot going for it in terms of not becoming the political clusterfuck that is Roshar. First of all, we just got a lot less space because the sun is a deadly laser, and humans can only survive with a few horses and dogs and stuff at the very North Pole. Not as many places means not as much cultural diversity. Or anything diversity. But what the limited surface area really does is make it super easy for Mr. $5 footlong over here. Get it? Because he's the Lord Ruler. To mobilize his giant purple death machines against any threat to his glorious empire. Eat flesh. Because really, it's all about the story. Oh, come on, if you knowingly clicked on a J-Maniac video, you knew what you were in for. All I've got is this hammer, and everything else is starting to look a whole lot like ham. Say you're building a world with 2 major cultures on it. You might think you just have to do all the culture A work and then all the culture B work, but you actually have a third thing to work on. AB, their interaction, how they see each other, how their history has developed around each other, how the stories they tell about the world and about events differ, and what effects that has on the world.
Wow, what brilliant insight. It's so deep, it loops right back around to being stupid.
Thanks, Kirito from the far superior Sword Art Online Abridged. And yeah, it might seem obvious now, but this is a real bastard when it pairs up with its devastating partner, math. See, each one of these, A, B, and AB, is X amount of work to flesh out and build. So if you have 3 cultures, well then suddenly you've added 3 more to the mix. C, CA, and CB. Add D, and pretty soon you're gonna have ACDCCDs, and my ADHD is gonna go, well that sure sounds like a task for never. World building complexity is exponential. If the Lord Ruler is able to control the stories people tell about their lives, everything gets a hell of a lot simpler because of the very same principle we outlined at what would have been the top of this video if I could get to the damn point any faster. Simple storytelling is catchy. The same simplicity that appeals to fantasy readers at large, from clear class divides and easy answers for all the big questions to a common enemy and color-coded blaster fire, also appeals to the people that you want to maintain control over. Simplicity that says, for example, that you can determine things about someone's personality based on their appearance, such as amount of evil and amount of good at math. That binary gender exists and can tell you a meaningful amount about how someone acts, dresses, communicates, farts in public, and contributes their worth to society. That you are in fact entitled to everything you have and deserve it because of work you did or did not do, divine right you do or do not hold, etc. And you definitely weren't subject to an arbitrary system which decided to benefit or take an enormous shit on you. And many, many more. It's textbook fascism, fear-mongering, hypernationalism, and gaslighting with just a little bit of encouragement in the form of revisionist history, silencing any attempt to push for a nuanced interpretation, constantly defending the people in power because they did something meaningful like 1,000 years ago, which in this case is neither relevant or true. Controlling the flow of current information, discrediting any source he doesn't control, and trying to stamp out sources of alternative knowledge or ideas which could threaten the current hierarchy or widen the scope of possibility. Just sterilize the terrorists and demonize the Kandra, and no one's been alive long enough to prove you wrong. 3. Making himself and his church the only source of legitimacy when it comes to legal or socially acceptable affairs. 4. Setting up towers throughout populated areas where allomancers can emotionally manipulate people into accepting their fates. Well, it sure is a good thing we don't have an analog to that in our reality. With such a stranglehold on knowledge and ideas, even the nuance that does struggle to the surface despite the Lord Ruler's harsh divides will still only exist on his terms. Sure, there are half-ska, but they grew up with the trauma of never belonging to either social or radical class, with a constant threat of having to hide their identities. The closest thing we get to a support group for that is literal organized crime because they are not allowed to exist. You can still explore cultural variations while building a system like this, but they aren't all in conversation like each other like they are on Roshar. They're all in conversation with this. They're all subgroups of this. More limitation means easier creativity. Boy, I should make a video on that. It's almost like I've already written a video on that, and these just take really fucking long to edit. We here in Fantasyland adore the evil empire, because of course people don't sort themselves into 12 districts, each with their own economic specialty in real life, but for stories it's super convenient. They make the world you're building into a cookie-cutter reality that's so easy to understand and identify with so they can sell their subjects that story on a dark side trademarked platter. We can curse them for simplifying the world so, even as that color-coded bullshit is the only reason we didn't leave that book to the worms as soon as somebody started saying a whole bunch of shit about Thalen eyebrows. It also gives the protagonists a goal. Topple the current regime. Well shit, that's a simpler goal than I wake up with most mornings. No wonder it's appealing. And that's what I love about Mistborn as a whole. It takes that super easy approach that's carried entire series before and guillotines it by book 1. Meaning that for 2/3 of the story, our protagonists actually do have to deal with the nuance that creates. We still get to play in the Lord Ruler's makeshift reality, but now we're taking a Duralumin-propelled flying brick to the systems and we're actually getting to see the consequences. Even when Sanderson builds simple, he doesn't let it sit on its haunches for long. You just gotta wait. Maybe a few hundred pages before stuff starts moving. Any second now. Sanderland just coming. Just a little bit, a teensy little bit more. The point for all you amateur world builders out there is Don't let examples like Roshar intimidate you out of authentic world building. After all, what we know as good old Bradicus Silmarillion is merely the conduit of an author hive mind that linked itself together in order to achieve that which no single fantasy writer could. Don't be afraid to build something simple. Just keep in mind that cultural simplicity is also the tool of bigots, cult leaders, fascists, and Veronica Roth, author of Divergent. Don't fall into those traps. Know exactly what those easy answers are there to cover up. We mostly talk about hard world building here on the channel, as Hello Future Me would call it, but if you want to write cool fantasy and find yourself drowning in the horrible squelchy bog that is world building anxiety, I'd really recommend this video on soft world building. Gods, I swear I'm not sponsored or anything. If I sound like I'm selling something, it's just because I was raised capitalist. Let me know if you want me to talk more about world building, the Cosmere, or anything else. I'm Jay, J-Maniac, and remember, all cops are bastards, eat the rich, and may the survivor guide you. I'll see you next time. Timing. Gods, that's what it was.